Good evening. You are listening live to the Extreme Movie Show. I'm your host, Rob, broadcasting to you from the Pineless Palace, just west of Orlando, Florida. I have from the Great Midwest one RDV with me here in the Extreme Studios. Tonight, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to be covering our bread and butter, which I'd like to say to everybody, especially the newer listeners, if you haven't heard it already, I'm an 80s child, so it's an 80s based channel. RDV's the 90s guy, and Professor Pixel, that young 20-something, as I always like to say, is whatever we call them because they haven't earned a title. But speaking of titles, RDV, we're talking about a title that I would call as a B-list movie. That's not a negative thing. Called Iron Eagle from 1986, something that we covered 2, 3, 4 years ago here. And we just thought, we just kind of want to touch base on, especially with Lou Gossett. I think he passed in the past year or so, whatever like that.
Yeah.
I will just start off by saying this, guys. It's a movie that if you haven't seen it, you won't miss anything. But it's an example, really, of a lot of great movies in the 80s that most people just don't hear about, and you never were heard of unless, like, you listen to us or you talk to us or you live that time frame. RDV?
I was going to say that the 1986, two American gung-ho, basically American movies, propaganda, basically propping up the Air Force. You had Top Gun and you had Iron Eagle.
Yeah,
I love them both because you get to see the planes actually flying. As I love about this, you get to see the cockpit view, you get to see the X-16s, you get to see two different versions of the X-16. The B, which is basically has the dual passengers, which was very heavily featured in Top Gun, but you also get the single fighter jets, which is the Evergar F-16s, which they have in here. Which is I love to seeing this, the MiGs, all this stuff. Like, these movies get me pumped up because I just love them. They're pro-America. And who's the bad guys? Middle Eastern country that basically wants to fuck us over and
Kerplakistan.
Yeah.
Right?
Like I said, and not only this, as I was just telling Rob before this went live, this feels like the Goonies, but on the Air Force base.
Oh, darn those kids. What will they do next? What kind of trouble they've gotten themselves into?
It's so far-fetched because they each have parents that are on the base, and they go to visit them, and then they grab what they need to do, the intelligence, hacking the computers and stuff. And just like, I love it. It's just so cool. Obviously, this would never happen in real life. There's no way it could possibly happen without somebody getting caught. But it's just enough. It's like watching a Disney movie, but better, I'd say.
Yeah, I think one of the challenges when we talk about movies and the way the culture has changed over the decades and all that, and we do like to talk in themes here a little bit, is that, in the 80s, you could go see a top-tier movie, but you didn't have as many screens, so you might go see a second film if the first one was sold out or whatever. And the thing I like about here, too, is Louis Gossett Jr., he'd been around for a very long time. He blew up in the 80s. He was another guy that you go, I'm not necessarily going to go see a movie. Oh, Louis Gossett's in it. I got to go see it. But you go, man, Louis Gossett's in it. It can't be that bad. I mean, because he had a lot of cachet to him acting-wise, and like I said, been around for quite some time. So him blowing up, one Chuck Norris movie did Firewalker. He's in. He's great in it. He's a great actor, and it's a movie that, like I say, if you go, well, yeah, Top Gun, that was an 80s thing. They just redid it, Well, what other stuff is out there is pro-America that's not like anti-commie kind of thing, right? There are movies out there, but everyone goes, oh, Iron Eagle, it's like the poor man's Top Gun. And I don't look at it that way.
No.
When you said it's like the Goonies, what I like about it, too, it's young men basically saying, you know what, we're going to do the right thing, even if it means breaking the law. And I know it sounds kind of hokey in a way, but that's kind of the whole idea for it.
Yeah.
What better thing to do than sit there and say, I'm going to do this to go get my man out, And it works. It doesn't have to be deep or complex. The enemies don't have to have a reason for doing what they're doing. It just is.
You had Rambo 2. Same thing, where this is a movie, the American government, and he's basically Jason Gedrick's father gets shot down over international waters, and basically he's held hostage. American government's not going to do anything, So he basically goes to Louis Gossett Jr. and says, "Hey, they're basically effing over my dad and Chappie," and we get to learn a little more about Chappie. How he basically doesn't want to work with them at first because of the fact that everyone he's known, pilots, has died. He has that guilt, but eventually they work it out. They go to save his dad, and just hijinks and everything ensue. It's kind of like it's similar to basically, like I said, the second movie for Rambo, which I think was just called Rambo, wasn't it? But anyway, remember how they cut him off? They weren't gonna go help him. So he has to like save himself.
Yeah.
So you kind of got that. That kind of the government kind of didn't care about the small guy, but it was also pro-government because it was a weird concept they had going on in the 80s.
Yeah, and I think a part of that is when we go back and we talk about First Blood, like 81, 82, stellar movie, phenomenal movie, great movie. It's
Yeah.
one of the first big mainstream movies to really kind of cover the plight of the Vietnam vet coming back, having PTSD, and the way they weren't accepted coming in. And so I think the success of that and the fact that people treated that seriously, especially things were dark in the 70s and they really lightened up in the 80s, but to carry that kind of message wasn't necessarily appealing to the mainstream, but it was still solid for adults and people that lived it. So there was definitely this vibe in the 80s of, hey, people were still around from World War II, Korea, Vietnam, and you had lesser things that were going on too. But for me, you can't ignore the fact that in the 80s, the military, not the government, but military, and serving it was more of a badge of honor than the way it's kind of portrayed today, at least on a big conflict. I'm not saying it's treated negatively, but there's definitely that. And then with Reagan being elected, and really by 86, I mean, this is peak Americanism, Reaganism, whatever you want to call it. Biggest landslide in history. Even though Trump had a big one this last time, it still wasn't as big as Reagan's. And I know it's hard to believe that, but that's how over America was. And Reagan was like, yep, things are doing good. We're going to reelect this guy. We don't care what's going on. I think Minnesota was the only state that didn't elect him. So when you had something like Top Gun or like this or other ones, it was great.
Yeah.
A built-in bad guy, right? The Ruskies generally, or any form of communism, and you would just have some big soldier kind of guy in there, and American guy comes in there and uses his ingenuity, his wit, and more importantly, that little sense of guts and humanism that made the American spirit what it is today, that no other country can have. And you kick ass. Here, it's just kids, doing the playing thing and using the military as an extension of it. So you're right, very pro-America. Nothing wrong with that.
Like I said, this also was a very big product placement. Sony Walkman the kid was wearing strapped to his leg. The soundtrack. Let's talk about the soundtrack.
Okay.
You had Road of the Gypsy was the main song. Obviously, that's by Adrenaline, band you probably never heard of, but you heard the song Road of the Gypsy, and you know it's from Iron Eagle because it's a good song. They play at the beginning, they play towards the end too. You also had what was the other one on here? I saw it was you had Queen.
Yep.
With one vision. And then you had Hide in the Rainbow by Dio. So you had some good well-known artists at the time.
And if you're a 70s person like me as well, there's George Clinton on there. There's other stuff.
Yes.
By this time, with how the success of Miami Vice on television, Michael Mann and all that, the whole idea, and MTV being really mainstream at this point, a couple years in, had already been around. You had this idea of, wait a minute, this 80s montage where we have like an armoring scene, a put together scene, a fight scene. And so now all these kind of cliche things, you really see them come to screen, but it didn't matter because it was fresh enough at the time where you didn't really care about it. So the whole idea, and it's goofy, is that, if you're a professional educator and you say to yourself, well, there's unconscious, incompetence, and then, unconscious competence. And, there's like a ladder allegedly of how people learn. This kid would be stuck on he's consciously incompetent because he knows he kind of sucks, but there's something about listening to music as he flies that puts him into the zone, right? And then they started giving him names in the 90s like ADHD or autism or on spectrum or who knows what other kinds of diagnoses that exist today. But it's funny because it's kind of silly in a way. But that's the 80s. Give me some tunes. Give me something going. Let me go kick some ass.
Yeah. Also,
we kick ass if you didn't have music playing.
Also, if you haven't checked out our Near Dark review, we did that. Because reason I'm bringing it up because we had Tim Thomerson was in this, playing the general. Likeable guy. He's been in a lot of movie, and I'll admit, he was younger. I'm like, oh, isn't that the other guy, Treat Williams? Every time I see him, he looks like they could just play each other like in different movies. Like they could.
I'm gonna say it, and I know it's cliche, but I go, man, Treat Williams was so good. He was such a treat. He really was. And I just saw some with him not too long ago. I'm like, man, I wish there was more Treat Williams. But you're right.
Yeah.
More Treat Williams, please.
Like it's really Tim Thomerson could have done a Treat Williams documentary or bio documentary, and vice versa. I love it. So I mean, you had some well-known, and you also had some ones that were kind of like just kind of nobodies, but you had actually Melora Hardin was in here. She was one of the, I think she played the girlfriend. I think, can't remember was Katie. Was that Katie. The name of the? Yeah. Yep. She plays his girlfriend in here. She went on to do she was really popular on The Office. Then
Yes.
she did movies like The Hot Chick. She was on Monk for a while. It's like, so she didn't really disappear, you know. But it's weird to see. I'm looking at him like she's 57 years old. Jason Gedirck is just almost 60 too. So it's crazy to think like, wow, it's been that long since this movie came out. Because you look at them, they were kids in this. I mean, kids. They weren't 20 something.
It's almost 40 years, bro.
I know, right?
Right.
But yeah, I've never watched. Apparently, there's sequels to this. I've never watched the other 3 or 4. Or I know 3. Yeah, 3 of them. Because I was like, well, I looked to see because okay, is Jason Gedirck reprising his role? No, it's just Louis Scott Jr. This basically being in every movie, you know, and all up to the 90s. And I was just like, okay, what? That's the one thing I don't like when you make sequels. You keep one person in there. It's kind of like Tremors. After a while, it's like I just don't care because the person I wanted to watch is not in there anymore. But we'll probably get to maybe Iron Eagle 2. About probably the only one we review. I looked at 3. Like 3's got a hot chick in there. And that's about it. She was a body builder. That's what she was. I looked it up. But getting back to this, I love this. I love the use of the bombs, the guns in here, the missiles, everything like the target lock. I said the just the kids planning everything. You know, the scheming around because it's like if this happened today, and if it did happen, I don't think it could, but if it did, they'd all be in Guantanamo. There's no way. Like,
yeah, but that's kind of not the point. And I'm telling you,
I know.
I always say it there and say there's got to be a time, and I go to summer of '85 with Commando flipping the switch of just complete, utter, unbelievable falsehoods about it. But you don't care when you're watching it. That was the whole point in the '80s.
Yes.
People go, well, this is stupid. That's dumb. It's like, have you seen what's in movies and TV
let me
today?
finish. I'm not saying it doesn't bother. It's not a negative thing.
No, it's not.
I love it.
No.
Everything from the filming of this movie to the soundtrack, just to the actors, it was just well done. And I hate how it kind of gets glossed over for Top Gun. Top Gun, I love Top Gun, but I don't think one's better than the other. I like them both equally because they're two different movies.
They are.
Top Gun was more drama. This was more like I said, like more like Goonies. Like let's go. I'm gonna save my dad. I'm gonna, kids dealing, becoming a man. And I said like I said this was a fun movie. Kind of like Flight of the Navigator. Trying to think what the other one with the Space Camp and a few other ones. It said this was a fantasy movie. It said pro-American. I love the fact it said it wasn't technically. It looked like Pakistan or Iraq, the country that his dad was held captive, but they wouldn't say. So I love that. Kind of like when you watch Missing in Action or Delta Force. Actually, Delta Force is more the one I should talk about. Everything you were allowed to basically paint the Middle East as the bad guy back then. Now you can't.
You can. They just won't do it.
No, that's it. That they won't do it. That's why I said you can't.
Yeah, look, the whole America thing, even if you're not like a violence fan or a war fan or a military person, there's nothing wrong with that. A young person today watching this goes, well, why would I care about it? Well, it's very representative of the type of movie that you could see because enough people would watch it. And yeah, the VHS sub-market now is starting to be a thing. So you had enough cachet in Louis Gossett to have a couple sequels. And so that was something new that you could start thinking of things in terms of franchises in a way. Nobody goes, hey, remember that Iron Eagle franchise? But you go, well, wait a minute, they had 2-3 movies, and it's the same thing. Goonies never had a franchise, just one big movie, right?
Yep.
Ghostbusters still popular enough where it kind of has its own franchise, on a bigger scale. I know you're a big fan of that, but even some of the other movies that you don't know about, you go, wait, there was a second, there was a third, there's a fourth. So I like how that became mainstream, where you can have a B-level movie, and Children of the Corn is a great example. That's a movie that came out. It's not horrible. It's kind of silly in a way. It might be kind of boring, but it's different. It's from Stephen King, kind of. Same thing with Leprechaun. I mean, even like Scream turned into a franchise on a bigger scale in the 90s, but its roots go back to days like with Halloween and how there's something about these movies that are watchable. They give you what you want. You understand what type of movie it is, and you can just let it play on and go, yeah, it's decent, like the people in chat are saying. And I think that one other thing about the 80s that I think allows this movie to be successful is that even if you don't look at it from the pro-America thing on it, you don't feel like people in here are like just cashing a check. It's when you've got a good actor like Louis Gossett and the surrounding cast, even if they're not A-list guys, a lot of them have a very long resume, and they do what they need to do, and that's it. It doesn't feel like they're just half-assing it. And there's no crappy CGI bullshit that you see that throws off your perception. There's a lot of actual great cinematography in here with the planes flying, which at the time was relatively unique.
Yes.
I'm not going to say it's at the same level of quality, but I will give you a comparison. A movie or two ago in the Mission Impossible franchise, I forget which one exactly, I think it was 2 movies ago, I call it the Halo jump, where that was filmed, where they jumped out. It's like a dusk or dawn or whatever. And I think they're flying into the Eiffel Tower or Paris or somewhere or whatever. And it's one really long take. It's the one that Henry Cavill was in. That's a phenomenal action piece. I mean, you don't care about the plot. You want some really great scenes set up with some stuff tying it together, right? And that movie does a really good job of having action in it. This obviously nowhere near that kind of quality, but for its time, to see this a kind of extended fighting and people taking that somewhat seriously, that's pretty cool. And nobody, really talks about like Firefox with Clint Eastwood. We may have covered that, or at least we've talked about it. That'd have been a long time ago. But that was another thing too.
Top 10.
Air Force was like a big friggin' deal back then too. Not just Army Rangers or Spec Ops, but all of them. Why? Because people like that cared about America and they took their job seriously. And that was the feeling you got with them. Even if it's a bunch of brats doing it, they're doing the right thing.
Yeah. Bring up some of the other actors in here. We had Jerry Levine, who was in if you don't know who Jerry Levine is, you never watched Teen Wolf. When they're surfing on the car. Yeah. He was also
Teen Wolf is a franchise, bro.
I know, yeah. He was in Casual Sex. He was also Born on the 4th of July, and that weird movie called Out of Bounds that came out the same year, 1986. Yep. I believe that was the kid from Weird Science.
Anthony Michael Hall.
Yeah.
I don't remember if that's the one where he got jacked or if it was where he was a football player quarterback a little bit later, but yeah.
But another big actor here, Larry B. Scott from Space Camp, which I mentioned, came out this same year. But he's also in Revenge of the Nerds.
Yeah, absolutely. You would know him too if you saw it. That's a big franchise too.
Yeah, so I said you had some good actors in here at the time. Now you look at them older, you're like, I don't really recognize them at all. But absolutely, Larry B. Scott, you can recognize him always whenever you see this guy. Yeah. I'm trying to look up some of the other actors here too. I'm like, the guy who played the younger brother here played Matthew in here. I'm just curious what else he starred in. He was in Tremors. Then he went in franchise. Yeah, I know, right? Night of the Demons #2, which came with, it was a 90s movie. He kind of fizzled out. But yeah, dude, like I said, you had a good supporting cast here, which is really near this. And as you said, this is a movie you can sit down, watch with the kids. You get that gung ho, you just get that energized feeling when you're watching this. You're like, yeah. And they start, especially when he puts the music on towards the end after because Chappie ends up getting shot, and he's like, and he plays the tape, that Chappie recorded. He's like, you're in this, I probably, bit the dust, whatever. But he's like, you got this. He's giving a speech, basically a speech. And he basically announces this is Iron Eagle after blowing up the all the different sites and stuff. And then he's basically like, why don't you put my dad at the end of this runway with a Jeep with this flight suit, and it's like, or I'll just take out everything, including your precious oil fields and all stuff. And I was like dang, it was great. I said, like, I love everything about this movie, and if you've never seen this movie, you can check it out. It's on Vudu. If you can find it at Walmart, go ahead. It'd probably be like $5 or $7, but try to find a physical copy of this. This is definitely a movie you need, a must watch if you've never watched this at all. Honestly, it's one of my favorite 80s movies when it comes, because there wasn't many with the planes. I said, and then Top Gun, I don't think it's overrated. I just think
it's overrated.
I think it's over talked about. I think it's over talked about. It's still a good movie, but Iron Eagle, if you've never seen this, man, you need to check it out. It's great. I love it.
Well, here's the thing. When you get one movie and it's somewhat new, you go, okay, that's kind of like the standard. And then another movie comes out that's kind of like it, like a plane movie. You go, okay, now you have something to compare it to, right? So I'm not knocking Top Gun other than it was shoved down your throats.
But it overshadowed this movie, eclipsed this movie completely.
Oh, without question. Absolutely.
Yeah, this came out in January and Top Gun came out in the summer again. something like that. Probably June or July or something.
I think it was the summer. I think it was the summer where Top Gun was. Yeah, I'm not sure when in the year.
So people are like, oh my gosh, you saw this. I mean, what a time to be like in 1986. You see this movie, you're like, oh, this is actually really good. And watching it, and then Top Gun comes on. It's like, dude, we're getting a lot of cool Air Force movies,
Mm-hmm.
And then you had Airwolf on TV.
Yes. Flying was cool. I mean, and here's the thing with the 80s.
And it boosted sales for the Air Force too.
Absolutely.
Or not sales, but candidates. People were enlisting. People wanted to do this.
Oh yeah, you could take anybody from America, put the red, white, and blue on them, and they'd run through a wall. Most of them, or whatever, just because that's how strong that was for.
I agree. Iron Eagle over Top Gun. I thought Top Gun was bad, but Iron Eagle is just more a feel good movie, where Top Gun's more quotable.
One thing that was also going on in the 80s that started to become more mainstream is basically if you were a comic book reader, a loser, a nerd, a geek, a dweeb, whatever kinds of words people dumbed down, which they did do in the 80s, and all to not make you feel offensive and all that, it became mainstream where those things became accepted and cool. Not like today where everything's basically on the same level. I think there's almost really nothing differentiating levels of quality of stuff, so everything's kind of equally accepted. That's the reality of it. Back then in the 80s, not only did you have geekdom, as I'll call it, just a general rule, starting to become mainstream acceptable, you start seeing in movies where the government, United States specifically, wanted pro-America, pro-positive leaning type messages. And so you were going to have this in here, not so much in the 90s, but that was more of like the sub stuff, right? And we'll talk more about that as we do more 90s movies. The Hunt for Red October, all those Clancy films and all that. But for the 80s, though, anybody, as long as you're a supporter of the red, white, and blue, that's like you could do no wrong. I mean, it was amazing. We had mentioned Remo Williams, big flop, supposed to be like the American James Bond version of it. Bit of a mixed bag when you go to watch it. It lacked the punch that this movie has, even though this movie's a bit more simple.
Yeah.
But again, this knows how to put everything together in here and slap it all together, and it's a great example of what it is. You've got music, you've got action, you've got teens, trying to take action, not whine and complain. I'm going to take things into my own hands. Let's go kidnap a plane. You're like, oh, that's stupid. No, let's do it. It's cool.
You look at the action movies that came out in 1986. You had Eye of the Tiger with Gary Busey. You had Firewalker, Chuck Norris. You also had Delta Force came out that same year. Platoon. Yep. You had all these cool action movies coming out. You had Cobra came out. Brad came out. A lot of these cool movies coming out, and it's just the 80s was a time to be alive and just enjoy great cinema.
You could do two things in movies back then. Even today, I've mentioned this before. I think horror is the magic formula because you can make a movie so cheap and get a great return on that. You could pump them out. And, you and I had a very interesting conversation about the Salem's Lot reboot from last year, which to me is the weakest of all of them. However, it's visually by far the strongest, and it's still a watchable, likable film. Especially the soundtrack is killer, but it looks so damn good. In the 80s, though, you not only did you have that, you could have action movies. And one of our personal favorites, martial arts films, we had it was the golden era of ninja stuff. Has there been ninja movies before and after? Yeah, but not like canon films, not like other stuff, and no action films were like this, where it's like, hey, let's go over there, let's go kill some bad guys. I don't care who they are. We're going to shoot them up, blah blah blah, and do all that.
Yeah,
the shooting and all the action, realism's not what it's about.
You had action movies, comedy movies, dramas. No matter what genre you're watching, they were bangers. I'm not a big drama person, but like I said, when you have movies coming out that were drama related, like they were good in the 80s. Where nowadays, if it's a drama movie, it's a Lifetime movie, and it sucks. That's the quality you're getting. But I mean, you had sports movies of everything. Sports freaking movies were awesome. You had Wildcats, you had Hot Shots, you had American Anthem, Rad, and then you had for the color. Yes, Hoosiers coming out. Yep. The Best of Times. You had Color Money. I'm just looking at the list here. It's Karate Kid 2, which you can say is it's okay. It's a
franchise.
Movie. It's a franchise though. But I mean, like it was just cool. Like everything is coming out in 1986. I think we're gonna have to go back and go through these and see what we think is the definitive year for movies, which 80, because I'm thinking like 86 has got a strong potential for being the best year.
85 is very strong. So is
I
83.
know, I
Yeah.
know, but it's like it's just awesome.
A while ago, we did do
Top
just a
tens.
quick top tens of each of the
Yeah,
years there too. So,
it's
I mean,
linked
if
in
you
the
guys,
yeah, it's in the
yeah,
playlist.
it's in the playlist. It's it's just kind of a top thing to it. But what we also like to do is talk about the ones that people don't talk about. So one reason why I mentioned in the chat about Cobra Kai is the people that I think it's Horowitz is his name. The people that were involved originally with, and I think it's from 1984, the first Cobra Kai, and then of course the other stuff. Yeah, it became a franchise. If you're a guy, you didn't really care for it too much because it was kind of, Johnny was cool, but Dan LaRusso is kind of an annoying twat in a way. It's not a bad thing, but it's very what we would call junior highish, not even high schoolish in terms of the level up. Nothing wrong with it, right? And it's okay for
Mm-hmm.
what it is. And you're not watching it for kick ass. You're watching it because it's a teen drama. But the thing is when they redid Cobra Kai a few years ago, as soon as I watched the first episode, I think the first season was on YouTube. I went, they've got something here. They've got the same people involved. They did not slap shit together and call it Stranger Things, hoping they got something right. Because again, like I've always compared the two. The show that did and captured the spirit of the '80s the most to me is Cobra Kai, even though it's modern times, because you can still feel it. Stranger Things kind of has it a little bit, but they really get away from it, I think, season 2 to 3, even though they force some stuff in there. But again, if you weren't alive in the '80s, it's hard to go, well, what did it feel like? And all I could sit there and say is that, yes, people had some healthy optimism from the mid '80s to the end of the decade, and movies like this that celebrated that, you could not pump out enough of them. You just couldn't. It was not,
80s.
here's an action movie, let's just do whatever. No. Bad guys who are drug runners, easy cannon fodder, right? Things like Scarface that's still popular. It's, he's a bad guy, but he exemplifies the American spirit
80s,
by wanting to become somebody. Yeah, it's just, people around the world hated that. It's like, America's making these dumb and stupid movies. It's like, well, they don't have to be art films, right?
From what I can describe of the 80s, I mean, I was born in 85, so I mean, by 1990, I was 5 years old. But I remember, like, when I was little, like, for about 89 stuff, just growing up, it was basically everybody just wanted to have fun. There was no seriousness, people were generally more happy. People were more patriotic. They love their government.
Mm-hmm.
If there was protests, it wasn't like it is today, where people laying in the streets and all that weird stuff. Generally it was just rebelling, because basically that's what Gen X were. So they were basically, you rebelled against the what was considered to be impolite. You were strict parents. Growing up, what you can do, what you can't do. So the 80s was just basically just celebrating life, and also, I mean, they were rebooting older movies from the 40s,
Mm-hmm.
and some of the 80s stuff, and then just giving them a little more 80s vibe. Like I said, it was all around, but having fun. You're allowed to do more stuff than you are today. It basically became where, like, the 80s was like the kids rebelling, and then the adults said, you know what, no more of that crap. Now we're back to where we before the 80s.
I would describe it differently, in that it was really the boomers that nobody likes rebelled, because they're the softest generation, because the greatest generation made them soft. And so the Generation Xers basically kind of do stuff on their own. So a lot of them were latchkey kids, even though we talk about the economy being decent in the 80s, it sucked in the 70s. We're having a repeat of that kind of now. And so you had parents going back to work. A lot of women were going into the workplace, even if it was just part-time. So you'd be 12 years home, babysitting, doing stuff. You took on a lot of adult responsibilities as a teenager. By and large, you'd go to parties, you'd drink, you'd do whatever and all that. I mean, it's not that drugs weren't ever accessible to anybody at any particular time, right? But you would party, you took it upon yourself, and there was this, I'm going to, influence my outcome by doing stuff. And so when you had movies, even if they're like John Hughes movies that are somewhat nice most of the time, the whole idea of who am I, what group do I belong into, where am I going, what's my path, as much as you go, it's a bunch of whiny kids, you go, no, they're trying to take it seriously as best they can with what they have, and people like that. So that was definitely a chord there too. And nobody thought less of somebody going into the military if that was their vision. It wasn't like, oh, you can't do anything, you're a bum, you got a 90 IQ.
You weren't called a baby killer and all that weird stuff. You weren't. No, you're not that stuff.
Yeah, so
No,
it's definitely an interesting time. There's definitely a lot of different aspects going on culturally that, like I said, this movie could be really
do
successful
you
at the time.
notice the other thing? When Chappie and Jason Gedirck in here, basically when they grab arms and they grab like this, I was like, oh my gosh, it's Predator. When I saw that, when they clasp their arms together, because I like it's only two movies I can think of where a white man and a black man basically grab arms and did, like what's up, I was basically saying like, well, you son of a bitch, But I thought that was interesting because there was no like racism in this movie whatsoever. Everyone got along. Everybody respected everybody. Like I said, it's just today is they put that crap in there to make you think that there's a lot of more racism today. Um, I don't think there was from watching anything in the 80s that there was anything really racist. It,
Well,
it
I
wasn't.
think
It was. It wasn't. There was no ideologies really being pushed. And if they were considered indie movies, and they weren't as popular.
you know that whole striving for where I belong is kind of an American thing, not just
Yeah.
American, but I think universal. So, like, if you had a nerd and you had a tough guy, it's kind of like, come here, nerd, do this. So you can't even do that. I'll do that. Well, you're stupid. I'll do this. So even though you have that dynamic, and
Mm-hmm.
I'm simplifying it, if you look at a movie from a few years ago, which is actually a really good remake of an 80s show, 21 Jump Street, you kind of have that with Channing Tatum, right? Where he's supposed to be
Yeah.
whatever. They kind of caught the spirit of that, I thought, pretty good in here. And if you didn't know that growing up in the 80s or whatever, and you're young and you see that movie, you go, oh, it's just kind of a comedy. Okay, maybe it's a little harsh or whatever, but they make fun of some of those things where they're in the parking lot or whatever, and they're trying to like go, okay, those are the emos, those are the rockers, those are this, those are that, or
Yeah.
whatever like that. And it kind of turns out not to be right. And I thought, wow, the people in Hollywood are smart enough to know that's not how it is when they were making fun of it. But even today, now you almost couldn't do it. It's hard to find even an R-rated comedy that really will push the envelope. You had that going on like crazy in the 80s too.
Yep.
Again, to your point, you said Goonies. It's not a cutesy adventure where you run
No.
around.
No.
It's a fantasy. It's basically an action adventure for young men, late teens, early 20s types. And so it's kind of an interesting comparison to it. I don't know if that would catch a lot of people's attention, but it made me think about it some.
Yeah. Like I said, I just love the 80s in general because you had different genres you go to. It's kind of like how manga is today compared to comic books. Comic books is kind of fallen away from that. You're kind of niche. They kind of want to push a certain message. Where manga is kind of like the 80s. You had if I want to watch a comedy movie, there's a lot of raunchy comedy movies, but there's also clean comedy movies. There's
Yes.
also action movies with comedy. There's action movies without that. There's martial arts. You had so much to choose from, the freedom of that, and there was no one saying, "Well, you can't do that kind of movie." Hollywood basically was all about making money. That's all they cared about. Today, they care about, well, we gotta be adapt to certain pander to this. Back then they realized they had an audience and they respected the audience. Now they make movies for themselves, and they said, how dare you don't like this, and then it shows. It's honestly like, dude, I think Hollywood was more American, pro America back then. Now they're just communists. That's what I'm getting at. It just seems that way with some of the directions they go. And I know you don't want to get into politics, but I'm just saying
I will say this, and I've mentioned before some things because we haven't done a lot of the hardcore kind of films.
Yeah.
We've done a few though. It's not a secret that in World War II we took a lot of the scientists who were communists and put them in our universities. A lot of them were in Hollywood already. You could talk about the anti-communism, anti-American kind of thing that went on in the 40s and 50s and all that too. And we only talk about it because it was definitely there, and it affected how things were being made. The business situation of studio systems now versus the way they were in the 80s, it was rapidly changing. So it's a little different now. Today, you can make a movie for very little money, but when you involve studios and the amounts of big money involved, people go for tentpole franchises thinking that can be a killer thing. Or some people take the volume approach. And I always talk about like movies like The Wolfman that came out recently. Not the best movie, but looks good. It's gonna make money, and yet you can still have some good ones. So I think now more than ever, you can make something relatively technically competent, but that doesn't mean it's interesting or good.
Guess what popped up on the cable the other day I was watching? The Wraith.
Yeah.
It popped out, and I'm like, caught the end of it, and I'm like, I've seen the movie multiple times, but I forgot at the end when he gives his brother the car, and like, I'm like, that is horrific. his dead brother come back to life to get revenge on the people that killed him.
Mm-hmm.
And then at the end, he's like, "Here, you can have this car. There's nothing like it. Gives a structure value." He's like, "Thanks." I'm like, that's a car he just murdered a bunch of people with. Now his brother's gonna go to jail for murdering people.
Like today, if you treat it seriously,
I know, but I'm just saying they weren't the best plot lines, but they're the most entertaining though. Like the logic behind them is kind of really flawed, but you didn't care because you're having fun.
Right.
That's what I mean. It's like, it's not an insult to turn your brain off to a movie if the movie is entertaining.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
But people seem to think that today it's like, oh, well, if you turn your brain off to a movie, well, I want, it's like, you're overthinking. I want to go to a movie, and if I enjoy it, I enjoy it. I don't try to overanalyze it. That's a mistake a lot of people do. They go in there and it's like, well, they're expecting this is this. When they don't get it, they get upset. This, I knew exactly what you're getting into it. It's going to be a plane movie. You're going to have a kid, basically going to fly a plane. He's going to go bomb some bad guys in the Middle East and get his dad and become a hero at the end. That's the 80s.
Yeah, and like I say in every episode of Miami Vice, you go, okay, there's going to be some music. Maybe you know it, maybe you
Babes,
don't.
you're going
to get some flashy sequences. You're going to get
boat, the
it's
car,
going to be a blur. Your attention span is going to be there. Yeah, there's going to be cocaine. There's going to be they're going to mention names like Escobar and Bolivia and you don't know what. And then somebody's car blows up his hair. But you know what? You're just there.
You knew every episode. The Tubbs is going to fall in love with somebody. Every other episode, they're going to meet somebody they're not going to like. They're going to threaten them, and then and then they're going to go after them, and they're like, well, we only got any evidence. It's the same formula every time, but you love it though because you love the music, you love the cars, you love the actors, and it's just fun. I mean, if you're against fun, you don't have fun, then I guess you won't enjoy a lot of things. That's my point. If you basically hold to it's either this or I don't enjoy it, I feel bad for you because I can watch a lot of movies, and then find something I can enjoy in them. That's my personal belief. If I'm going to waste 2 hours a movie I've never seen the trailer for, I'm going to look. I'm going to be damn sure to see, even if it's horrible at the end. I say it's a horrible movie. I'm going to look for something I can find in it that I enjoy. I did that with Batwoman season 2 and season 1. Everybody said it sucked. Yeah, it did suck, but there were good parts in it. And that's all I ask for anybody. It's like you watch a movie, at least try to find something good in it. If you can't, I can't fault you.
But I do appreciate in the 80s where and kind of finishing up some thoughts here that we touched on is that I like how, like I mentioned, geekdom and all that kind of stuff is being brought mainstream, where you could have a different particular set of skills that in the right situation make you valuable. So it was about the journey of discovering those and whatever, not the morality around it, but just, hey, will this help? Okay, let me do it. Right. That you're aggressing on the environment. You're becoming valuable to the group that you're in. You're getting your sense of worth, as Conan would say. And I don't know that I see a lot of films like it today. And I think this fantasy, generally speaking, of and I love fantasy, don't get me wrong, but the whole idea of having superpowers and this and that, to me that's difficult to grasp in a sense that you can't relate to them because they're not human. You don't see them struggle, and why they might put human themes into it, it really doesn't kind of parse that well. And in the 80s though, it didn't matter, like to your point, what race you were or sex or intelligence level or skill set or whatever like that. You were trying to do something and you're with a group of other people and you got it together. So kind of simplifying it, but it seemed kind of honest, I think, in a way. And I don't know that we see a lot of those positive messaging of what it means to be growing up, which means, hey, you're going to make mistakes, things aren't going to be perfect, and you're going to learn a lesson from it, and there's a price you got to pay, but what's the right thing to do? Let me figure out how to do it, because ultimately that's how you learn. And if you rely on everybody to tell you what to do and how to do it, what offends you, what not, then you really don't have a brain and you haven't exercised it. And it's unfortunate because, like, some of the comments are in chat, you would go to it, you would nitpick it or whatever like that, you'd have fun, and like we do here, we talk about what we think works, doesn't work, what we like, don't like, whether it's your kind of film or not or whatever. And again, You didn't grow up in the 90s. A lot of our audience didn't either. But when we talk about some of these themes and how we put it together, it might give you guys perspective on, okay, maybe I'm not crazy about it, but it was decent. But maybe my type is more of this kind of movie. And we haven't even touched like the BC level late night sex comedies that were real popular in the 80s. You don't even have those today, right?
We haven't reviewed Porky's. I know that.
Porky's is a good film.
I know. I mean, there's a lot of movies we haven't reviewed. We're into the nerds. We haven't touched that. There's a lot more comedy stuff. But I'm gonna say this: if there's any movies that we have not reviewed that are from the 80s that you think is hilarious or they're just awesome, let us know down in the comment section. We're always looking for recommendations.
Yes.
Even if it's a B movie, it's like I said, we're bringing up movies like with Lana Clarkson in it, like Barbarian Queen. Like I didn't know how many people would actually know what that movie is.
Oh yeah.
Or even Gore, and then Gore the Outlaw. Heck, we did Haunt the Slayer.
With You're the Hunter of the Future or whatever.
Yeah, yes. I mean, there was a movie with Molly Ringwald. I think it's called. Is it Space Hunters? I can't remember what it's called.
But I mean, Space Hunters Adventures in the Forbidden Zone.
Yes, I mean, I want to review that. I want to review Cyborg. Even I heard that it wasn't that great with JCVD. But I mean, there's a lot of good movies out there, and that I have not seen yet, and I'm just itching to review. The Wraith, we've never reviewed that on here, but I've seen that multiple times.
I swore we have, but maybe we haven't.
No, we talked about it in the top 10s.
Yeah.
Just as I said, there's a lot of cool movies on here. So
mainstream movies are easy. You're right. We like the second, third level movies, right?
Yeah. Like I said, if there's you're smacking me. There's a lot of cool stuff. Delta Force, I don't think we've reviewed Delta Force.
Just one of the guys.
Yeah, I think we've done
Class.
I said more Chuck Norris. I don't think we've done Delta Force or any of the Missing in Actions.
No, I don't think we have either.
No, so I mean, we got some Chuck Norris more to do. So if you guys have recommendations for the 80s or even the 70s, like disaster movies, I always love those. So that we have not reviewed on this channel, let us know down below in the comment section after the stream's done, and we'll take a look at them and then we'll check them out. There was a recommendation earlier, like in the beginning, before we went live, that I respond back to, but sadly it got deleted when I went live.
I saw that. It got chopped up here.
Yeah, so I think it was from the guy who's been doing giving reviews over on your Friday night show. What is it called? Forever Night. Somebody said you said so you should check this out. I'm like, oh, now I feel bad because I didn't write the movie down. So let me know down in the comment section. We'll check it out. Your recommendations.
I mean, easy.
I know we got. What was the other one? That was Sammo Hung. We did that was like the the Dirty Dozen. I forget what it's called, but it was an Asian Hong Kong movie where all the guys got together. And I think it was like it's on the tip of my tongue. I can't remember what it's called, but like so. We love recommendations for movies. And then also, if you can, leave a comment down below. Let us know also what you thought of this movie. If you've seen before, if you liked it, if you didn't like it. If you didn't like it, let us know. Tell me what you didn't like about the movie. Like I said, I love reading comments. It also helps. The algorithm helps us and tells the algorithm that we should be shared around to other people to watch. We do appreciate people turning on here to watch. We got Marania. We got Helium. Anthony, what's up? We got Dave, I believe. Then Jay was in here too, and I forgot who else was in here.
Rose, I'm sure will be listening.
Yeah, so thank you guys for all watching this, man. It's cool.
And we'll put the new poll a little bit later tonight too, as well.
I got a confession to make. We actually did this movie review 2 years ago, and we only had like 20 views, less than 20. So we decided, as I told Rob, I was like, why don't we just redo this? We got more people watching, and I think it deserves a better review. We kind of half-assed it too, so we deserve the views that we got. But thank you all for being here. Rob, do you have any final thoughts about the movie or anything else you want to pimp out?
Yeah, we're back on track with our schedule, so be looking out for that. We're finishing up Forever Night. We'll probably throw a Bond in there, so those have been going well. Those have been getting some views. That's kind of interesting. It is an interesting show that as we're closing out this season, it definitely feels like it's going somewhere. We're looking for any recommendations for some TV shows, and some stuff on the short list might be like Millennium or X-Files or something else. Sometimes we might do something older. We're not quite sure, but that's that's a big commitment because season ones are usually 20 to 25 episodes. You guys know that, at least back in real TV days, not these 8 to 10 episode things, right? But yeah, let us know on there too. I sometimes will do stuff occasionally solo if people aren't around. But yeah, look for us to be live on Sunday with whatever movie you guys vote on. Good night now.
All right. And Marani, I did get your recommendation there. Earth Girls are easy. I mean, yeah, they are easy, but they're pain in the butt.
Well.
Let's see. All right, guys. And I just got one more thing to say. Stay extreme!
that damn explosion. That's like out of that Contra video game.